Okay, hi. Good evening. Happy Tuesday night, December 21st, 2021. Brendan Glasheen, Chirag, Hira, Matt Meiselman. They are a couple of DraftKings content
Don't say it. Don't
specialists.
say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. I told you stop saying it, man.
You never said, did you actually?
Nah, I'm just messing with you.
Well, just keep saying it. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Meiselman, you have DraftKings sportsbook content specialist, right? Or do you do a little bit of everything, right? We're all jack of all trades.
Matt is a Swiss Army knife on our team. That man can do hockey, basketball, baseball, football. Come on, bring any sport into town. I'm gonna throw this upcoming year. I'm gonna make sure that Matt has to write about some soccer. We're gonna throw everything his way.
Wow. What a great Christmas gift / New Year's present for Matt Meiselman. You're going to cover more sports. Your boss telling you live on the air, on Twitch, YouTube, and on the DK Nation Twitter page. We are getting you set for a pair of NFL games tonight. We've got the football team led by Garrett Gilbert taking on the Eagles, and a lot of injuries, COVID issues with the Seattle Seahawks, and they're taking on the Rams.
Man, this guy's messing up his birds.
Eagles? What do you mean? Eagles are playing tonight.
You said taking on the Eagles.
Eagles. Yeah. And then we got NBA tonight too. So we're going to do a whole lot of crossing sports tonight. Where we really don't have like a straight format here because of all the news coming in. So pretty much, if you've got questions, comments, concerns in the Twitch chat, also the YouTube chat, we will go right to them and do our best to answer all of them. So Chirag, Hira, we'll start with you because you're the boss and you're putting all this heat on Meiselman to start the show. Right. What is your leadoff thought of the night when you look at news and how it's impacting decisions you're going to make on the sports book and or daily fantasy?
Well, is it finally time for DK Metcalf to have that big game? Tyler Lockett has already been ruled out. Will he be able to finally show up? That is a big question. A, for the fantasy football playoffs that I'm in, that I have to beat Zwyman in. But B, in your showdown contest, in your lineups here. I'm concerned. I want to know where Matt stands with this in terms of ownership. How popular is he going to be on this 2-game slate? Can we fade him? This is the spot. If he doesn't perform in this spot, like, is DK Metcalf done for the year?
All right, is that my cue to weigh in on Metcalf?
Yeah, weigh in. Tell the people what you think about DK Metcalf.
So I think there's one player that's going to be popular on this slate that you can't fade for the 2-gamer. It's not Metcalf, it's Cooper Kupp. Like, I almost think that if he's 100% owned, you still just eat the chalk because there's just no one like him. So just putting that out there, I still think you probably want to play Metcalf in your lineup. So this is difficult because 2-game slates, it depends a lot what contest you're in. If you're in these massive fields with tons and tons of people, maybe that's where you try to stack the other game, because the first thing that stands out to me is that the Seahawks-Rams game is going to draw a lot more attention than the Washington-Philly game. And for that reason, if you're starting your lineup with Metcalf and Kupp, you are basically doing what everyone else is doing. That isn't to say I don't think you can play Metcalf. And I think you kind of just can't afford to not have Kupp. Like, unless he gets injured, I think he's 15 fantasy points minimum, maybe even a little higher. The floor is just so ridiculous. Like, he's just a target machine and he's so efficient that like game script is not going to hurt him. So I do think this is a reasonable starting point. If let's say Kupp is 92% owned and Metcalf is like 55, I still think you can start a lineup with these guys. I think then though, we have to look at quarterbacks from the other game and maybe take that as like the contrarian route. Or if you're going to play Stafford or Wilson, you need to avoid playing the rest of the chalk from this stack, which includes Gerald Everett at tight end most likely, and then Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson. I think those are like the stack combos that are going to be really popular. And then I think most people are playing the Eagles defense and Miles Sanders because, you know, the Eagles are playing Garrett Gilbert. This should be a pretty good game script for them. So whether or not you play Metcalf, I think just has to do with the way you want to build the rest of your lineup. If you're willing to go contrarian at other spots, I think starting with these 2 wide receivers is totally fine. And if you want to play Stafford, maybe you need to play a different Seahawks receiver instead of Metcalf and go a little bit different that way.
So we did a show, last Monday, Meiselman, and we had the Rams and the Cardinals. The Rams had no Ramsey. Last I checked, he's back. So he likely draws the assignment of Metcalf. Chirag, does that, or does that not concern you?
I mean, you don't really have a choice. The way we've seen the way the scenarios have been lining up, like it doesn't make a difference at this point if he shadows him or not. He needs to get the production. Where else are you going to look? Are you definitely sure about any other option on this offense? Yeah, the Seattle offense hasn't been particularly great. I wouldn't say that you're going to say, oh my gosh, like they're going to score a ton of points. But when you look at it, like, can you trust any of these guys? Freddie Swain, Dwayne Eskridge, Penny Hart. Are we feeling it? I mean, Gerald Everett, Matt mentioned, is going to gain a lot of ownership because of that. He's going to gain a lot of popularity because there are no other options on this slate that you can say, all right, well, somebody's got to get some balls. And look at that. You have him sitting there as the second most expensive player on this slate. Right. At 3,600. That's not very expensive. Like, that's a punt spot basically sitting there. So he's likely to be popular. So I think that there is no other game that DK Metcalf can outperform in right now. But like, Jalen Ramsey is a solid shutdown corner. So it'll just depend if he plays the side of the field or if he plays straight up against him. That's something that Ramsey, we've noticed, hasn't shadowed as much this season because of the way that their defense has been set up.
And there's no real semblance of a running game in Seattle with Alex Collins being ruled out. Then again, Penny had a good game a couple weeks ago. So maybe Rashad Penny can be a breakout running back at 5,400 on the slate tonight. So Meiselman kind of brought attention to this. The total with the news of Gilbert, the total goes down to 40.5. The last I checked, now it's down to 40. Washington football team, Philadelphia. So I guess the real contrarian move on a 2-game slate like tonight is you stack up that game. Do either of you feel confident in and over 40 points with Garrett Gilbert against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles?
Confident? Definitely not. I think that I would lean more towards the over.
Is there a path there? That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
The path there is a defensive touchdown.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Eagles' defense is great either. I think they're a fine defense. And Washington does have skill players that are good, like Antonio Gibson, even with McKissick out, can catch passes out of the backfield. And obviously Terry McLaurin is really good. Like, I think that's the player that I'm most interested for this slate, just across the board in terms of like where his ownership will be. So I think Kupp is a good play that you just have to have. I think Metcalf, even as chalk, is still worth it. Like Chirag was talking about Ramsey there. There's one, it's true. There isn't much else, but also like, I just don't think that these matchups matter nearly as much as people think. And I know there are going to be people scared away from the Metcalf matchup with Ramsey, that maybe he's only 50% instead of where he should be, which is probably like 70 or 80%, because there just are not a lot of good receiving options on this slate. But I actually do think it's viable to play Kupp, play Metcalf, and then play McLaurin. And one of the ways you're going to need to save salary to be able to do that is to play a cheaper quarterback. So I think the McLaurin stack with Gilbert makes a lot of sense. And then you can kind of just play chalk around that. I haven't played around with lineups that much to know whether you can fit Jalen Hurts, because it's not like I want to fade Hurts and just hope that Washington scores all the points. If Washington is able to score, I think the Eagles are going to need to throw more, and then Hurts probably has a big game too. So maybe what we really need to be talking about is, if you're starting a lineup like this with what you have on screen with Hurts, McLaurin, Kupp, and Metcalf, then you need to find another contrarian pass catcher that doesn't cost that much. And I think that's kind of the way to go. So this is definitely a slate where I probably only want to play 2 running backs, and then find like a $3K, $3,500 receiver. That could be Jalen Reagor. That could be Quez Watkins. I don't think you can really fit Devontae Smith in this lineup the way it's starting out. So you probably do need to go cheaper. And then I think playing an off-the-board running back is interesting too, because there's not a lot of clarity on the running games for a couple of these teams. Penny is the starter for Seattle, but he got a lot of work because the Seahawks had a big lead against Houston. We could see DJ Dallas take over if they're trailing. They rely on him more as a pass catching back. That could work out as a stack option where Seattle's losing and Dallas actually plays more of the second half than Penny does. We don't know really what the split's going to be between Sony Michel and Darrell Henderson. So I do think there are a lot of ways to get different. Even if you start your lineup with Kupp and Metcalf and a popular quarterback, whether that's Hurts or Stafford. But I do really like McLaurin, and then I think you can, just go from there and see what kind of fits around this.
Okay. Yeah. And to Chirag's point, I mean, you're getting a little bit of a savings with Metcalf over McLaurin, and you have Russell Wilson throwing him the football as opposed to Garrett Gilbert. So that makes sense.
Look at Gilbert's price right now. Look at his salary. If you look at his salary right now, you're setting up where it's 4,800. 4,800. What does he have to do to get there? 15 points, 20 points. Like, sure, it might be difficult, but you don't know how many points they're going to be down later in the game. They could be down 14 points, and he has to just sit there and throw the ball 25, 30 times. And 15 to 20 fantasy points could be a differentiator enough to where it allows you to spend up everywhere else. At 4,800, you take him, you take Gerald Everett at 3,600, and you have so many options then because you're already paying down for two big spots. Now you can play literally every single expensive player that you really want to.
All right, those are our 2-game slate thoughts. Of course, there are showdowns available on DraftKings. Be sure to get involved if you can. What did we say? I know we kind of hinted at the sports book with the total. Should we make our way over there? I know we're going to make our way to the NBA very soon, and we'll, of course, get you any news in regards to the NBA. Our latest piece of news is related to the Mavericks. Tim Hardaway Jr. to the COVID list. He is out tonight. So we'll get to the NBA in just a few moments. So those of you that have NBA questions, we will get to them. We do have a question as it relates probably to this 2-game slate, fellas. And the question is about Seattle, and Meiselman, you kind of just touched on this. If you want to play Kupp, Metcalf, McLaurin, you're going to have to sprinkle in a cheap receiver down the depth chart. Freddie Swain, Eskridge. That's the question from Miami Misfits. Who's the better play, Swain or Eskridge?
I think Swain's the safer play, but there's probably a little more upside with Eskridge. It seems like he's gotten more of like the down the field role. But honestly, I think that there's a lot of variance in general with the way Seattle plays, where they actually are pretty run heavy offense, and Russell Wilson makes up for that by throwing a lot of deep balls. So you really can't be that confident in anyone. And I think that does kind of include Metcalf to some extent. Like, I'm not going to say Metcalf is safe. I just think the upside is so massive that more likely than not, you're probably going to need him. But with the cheaper guys, like if both of them have one catch or less tonight, I think that wouldn't be that surprising. So I just don't have a good answer for this. I do think it's a good idea to try to play one of them, but I don't really have a good answer as far as like which of them is a better play. I think there's decent amount of upside with both and pretty significant downside with both also.
Freddie Swain scored a touchdown at the end of that game against Washington in a primetime spot a couple weeks ago. I think that was the Meiselman. We were on the show together. It was Monday night, and that was the Jeff Ulrich call tonight, Freddie Swain. So I don't know, primetime spot, maybe something at the end there. Russell Wilson's first game back, or second game back. So there's that. Freddie Swain. Okay.
Or there's Glash trying to pull narratives out of his Christmas hat.
See, I got nothing else for you. That's about all I got.
That's it.
That's all I can contribute to this show.
I thought you had a present for me in there. I was waiting for a surprise present.
Yeah, it's $5 DK just for you.
Oh man.
What are our opening thoughts on the showdown side? Of course, the lines have been moving all day because of the Washington football team news as it pertains to the quarterback. But Seattle and LA, it's been hanging around 7. Now Seattle is a 7.5 point underdog. Total up at 47. What jumps out to you here, Chirag?
Just a scenario where you have to pay up for, if you're talking about showdown or sportsbook?
Sportsbook, sorry.
Yeah. So I just think that I personally like playing same game parlays when you have a situation of a hook like this. So if you wouldn't mind going into the matchup for the Seahawks and Rams and hitting the same game parlay button.
Inside the matchup. Here we go.
So basically what I like to attack is when you have a 7.5 point hook, I try to bring it back under that. So if you can go 6.5 or you go 2.5 and try to protect on the game line. When you go to the game lines, it gives you an option to select an alternate game line.
Yep.
So I like selecting different game lines and trying to get away from that hook. So what that does is now you can look at this number and you see the total has fallen down to 46.5. So what that gives you an opportunity is you have the half point here to build on, and then you get the other half point on the total. So over or under. I personally think that this game is going to go over, but at the same time, you can look at it and you can build a number that is different. So we can go 44.5. We can go 45.5. I would say probably 44.5, and you put them together in the same game parlay. This gives you the opportunity to get the over on what the total is, and you still get that field goal kind of separation there to protecting you from the backdoor cover. So that's kind of how I would attack this slate, because I don't like that hook of the 7.5. So I'm going to take it in the same game parlay, have two outcomes affect it. Sure. But if I'm watching this game and I'm sweating it, like, do I feel comfortable with that hook? Probably not.
I feel like that's been Meiselman, that's been a strategy for these games with all of the news filtering in and out with players onto the COVID list, off the COVID list. Not the worst idea, to Chirag's point, to maybe buy a half point here, buy a point here, in either direction you're feeling good about.
Yeah, I think in general, you just have to be mindful of what the price is on the bet, because like here we have plus 195, and it can be hard at times to quantify how much better the line is to where you only are getting plus 195, whereas a standard parlay with two things that are minus 110, you're getting like plus 260, plus 265, something like that. So you are like paying a bit of a premium where you don't get nearly the odds if you want to take these alternate lines. I do think there's an opportunity to try to correlate in a way where a final score outcome, it kind of like threads the needle where you can hit both, and maybe the same game parlay algorithm doesn't get it properly. So like an example of this would be if you want minus 6.5 with the over at 46.5, 27-20 gets you there. So I actually don't know how efficiently that's priced. Like, see, you're only getting plus 215, whereas I think if these were alternate numbers, like where it wasn't key numbers, because 47 is a little bit of a key number in football, like that's a common final total. 6.5 is obviously a very important number, with 7 being a common margin. So if you were, buying a point or so off of non-key numbers, you probably would still get better odds than this. So ultimately, I think this comes down to preference. Like, if you really think that the Rams are a good bet at minus 7.5, just bet them at minus 7.5. Like, I think you're just getting better value there than buying the points, because it's priced in. It's not like the pricing algorithm doesn't know that 6.5 is substantially more valuable than 7.5. And you can see that with the way the parlays are priced. Personally, as far as like the way this game is going to go, I actually agree with Chirag a little on the total. I do think I would lean over here. With Tyler Lockett out, I mean, it's definitely going to hurt Seattle's offensive efficiency, but I just wonder if maybe they have to take more shots downfield with more unproven guys. Lockett is more of like their short passing game guy. That might be reaching a little as far as like the way this plays out. But I would probably lean over a little. I think it's more likely than normal that Seattle has to abandon their running game, because they tend to be a really slow-paced team. But they haven't played too many games recently where they've gotten very far behind. They've been 1 or 2 scores down a couple times against San Francisco, against Washington. They had a huge lead against Houston. I think we could see a very different game flow for them. One, because they're missing their running backs, Collins, and then Chris Carson's been out a while, obviously. And I think with the Rams being a significantly better team, we could see them needing to pass more, and that could lean towards the over too. So yeah, that's like, if I don't really have a strong take for this game, but I do agree the over is probably the lean instead of the under.
Okay. For the Rams, I'm curious as to what kind of game we're going to get out of them, as far as, Arizona losing again kind of opens the door for the division, for sure. And then look, I mean, we're at that point in the year with Seattle where I just don't know what's going through Russell Wilson's mind. I mean, does he sacrifice a player or two here and there because he's worried about his future and he wants to go somewhere else? I don't know. I'm just speculating. It's all speculating. It's rumors. but I'm curious what kind of football team we're going to see in terms of Seattle this week against a more hungry, smelling the blood, if you will, in the Rams with their opportunity at hand here. What about the other game? I mean, I'm tempted, even though Garrett Gilbert's the quarterback, I'm really tempted to hammer the over here at just 40. Now it's up to 40 and a half.
Hey, they heard you. They heard you.
I don't know. I like it.
You. But
I still like the over here. I trust Ron Rivera's coaching to get this kid ready. I do.
Yeah, but like now you're sitting there. You need basically 3 touchdowns minimum in this game, if not like setting up for at least like I said. I honestly think the way to get this number over is with the defensive touchdown. So maybe that's somewhere to look. But this is a struggle for me in this game to really like figure out what to do, because if Philly just says we're going to run the ball, they don't have a problem with that. They have capable backs. And the thing is, what's going to matter is this Washington football team has known to struggle against wide receivers. So which wide receiver is going to play well? So I just think there's a lot of avenues for the over, but just worried a little bit about a game plan.
Yeah.
So what if Washington goes into ball control mode? What if they play dink and dunk? What if they change it up a little bit? So you don't really know. At this point in the season, they have nothing to lose and they can just throw anything out there.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. Philly has no problem running the ball. And like we saw with the Cleveland Browns last night, you'd like to think you got a quarterback, you throw them in there, they're just going to pound the rock. And that's exactly what they did. Now, look, Nick Mullins at times made some throws when he had to.
Yeah.
Pretty accurate for most of the night. But I don't know. We've seen a little more of Nick Mullins. Isn't there only one game for Garrett Gilbert, which he did cover, by the way? He's 1-0 against the spread in his career. That was at Dallas. I think he took over for Ben DiNucci in Dallas for a game.
Man.
That's about it, though, right, Meiselman? I mean, both teams here are predicated on running the football as far as a formula.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a little bit about this. I think we should jump to NBA sports because honestly, like, there's enough unknowns here that
yeah, that's true.
Like, it's hard to just have a strong take. We don't know how healthy Jalen Hurts is, and we don't know how ready Garrett Gilbert's going to be. I do think that if you're playing for the over, that favors a game script where Washington keeps it close more so than the other way around. So there are cases where where a blowout actually is more conducive to the over because the trailing team will throw more. I think Washington's going to play pretty conservative no matter what because they just have such an inexperienced quarterback. Whereas on the other side of it, if the Eagles have a big lead with the health risks that Hurts has dealt with the lower body stuff, like I just don't think that they will ask him to pass much in the second half if they have a 2-score or more lead. So I would much rather parlay, let's say, like Washington to cover with the over than the Eagles to cover with the over. Not to say I want to do either of those things, but just like if you
there
have
it
to
is.
have.
See, Chirag, he always gets that in there. You notice that? Not to say I want to do it, but this is what I would do.
I promise I will have an actual take for basketball though, if we want to make a jump over there.
That a boy. So wait, would you say that? Would you say it one more time? You had the over or the under?
So I am leaning over and I'm leaning Washington to cover the spread. I think putting those two things together makes some amount of sense because in general, the favorite getting out to a much bigger lead, I think that would get you more points. It depends on the teams. It depends on the ways they play. Like some teams will just keep passing when they have a lead. I think Miami Dolphins are kind of like this. The Rams are actually kind of like this. Like they'll just let Stafford keep chucking the ball downfield with a lead. I think because of the injuries that Hurts has dealt with over the last few weeks, if the Eagles are up big, they're not going to be doing that. So that's kind of why I'm thinking like if Washington can keep it close, the game probably does get a little higher scoring.
Okay. We will get to your real quick. Then we're going to the NBA. CJ71 on Twitch has a quick question. Blanton, the tight end for the Rams, he was kind of the fill-in for Higbee. Any interest in $2,500?
I think this might be a pretty popular way for people to fit in players. Like, I don't know. I mean, the upside
on Monday night last week.
Yeah, the upside here is not especially high. Like, he's got to catch a touchdown. The odds that, because the Rams are relatively healthy at receiver, like they don't have Robert Woods, but they do have everyone else. Kupp and Beckham and Van Jefferson are all there. Like, there's almost no way that Blanton's going to get 7 targets in this game. That just doesn't seem very likely. So I don't think the upside is that high unless he catches like 2 touchdowns. I'd rather play a contrarian tight end. I think that is a good position to get different tonight. So that could be like Ricky Seals-Jones, who I think no one is going to play, just like everyone from the Washington passing game, who I think no one's going to play. So if you have a lineup that needs the savings here and it's otherwise pretty contrarian, I don't mind it, but I'm not very excited about him.
Okay, very good. Chirag, anything to add? Are you good?
He averages 1.1 fantasy points per game. So that's the take.
That's about as much time we should spend on him, I think, is the tone I'm gathering from that point you just made. So it's taken. Okay, let's go to the NBA. Lots to get to in the NBA, like not just COVID stuff, but of course, guys are banged up. I think the key names, Jokic, Lillard, are 2 names for sure. There's one more, and I'm drawing a blank on who exactly it is.
Kristaps Porzingis, yeah, that's
Porzingis.
Yep.
Okay, and that's a big game, of course. Dallas has a bunch of guys out. We found out Tim Hardaway's out. Chirag is wishing him the best, right? Is that what you said before we went live about Tim Hardaway? You're hoping everything's okay?
Yeah, I mean, the NBA has over 100 players in the health and safety protocols. Adam Silver came on today in ESPN with Malik Andrews and said that there is no plans to pause. There's maybe a contingency for Christmas games, but I just hope that all these players get better. And as Adam Silver also mentioned, that it's not the Delta variant, it's not the original. So we're prepared for the league to continue on.
Yep, that's the case. So we will keep you all updated if we get any news in the next 25 minutes or so before we wrap up. So Matt Meiselman said he has a take on the NBA tonight, a sizzling take, a take that has clarity. It's a declarative sentence. He will not interrupt this take with a caveat or an exception or something. It's very clear. What is it?
No way. That's not accurate. I will have to catch all of my So here, I'll just give a quick overview. I think there's 3 games on this board that I'm not interested in, 2 that I'm very much interested in. So that'll at least provide some initial
process
clarity.
Of elimination.
Yeah, let's do that. So I think the Pacers game, the Pistons game, and the Suns game, those lines are just where they should be. I think there's a chance to get an under spot for the Lakers Suns game, depending on starting lineups, but that's contingent. So we'll leave that alone for now. The game I'm most interested, though, is Portland, because depending on the way the news breaks there, we could get a massive change to specifically the over-under. I think it's obvious if Nurkic and Lillard don't play for Portland, the Pelicans are going to be larger favorites.
Yep.
Nasir Little is also questionable. They're pretty shorthanded. If those first 2 guys are out, then that actually kind of matters if you lose another depth guy. But I think what people may not realize is that, or at least the way I see it, is Damian Lillard is far more important to over-unders than he is to point spreads. I think we've seen games where Lillard's played and the Blazers have not done well. We're not going to go back to that, but that happens sometimes. And it's
a rule on this show. We don't do that.
Right. Yeah, we don't talk about past Blazers games ever. So then there are other times where Lillard doesn't play and Portland actually plays pretty well, but the games slow down a ton because Dame is not a good defensive player. He's a tremendous offensive player, and he speeds the game. I think this is the missing piece that sometimes people don't realize is the tempo he plays with is, I think it rivals Curry for and maybe Trae Young. Those would be the top 3 for speeding up the game. You could probably put Ja Morant in that category too. There's a handful of players in the league where the way they push the pace is just so different from what other guys do. And then Lillard also has the benefit in this case of not playing any defense. So let's say everyone else plays except for Dame. I think we see the Pelicans stick right around -2.5, maybe it goes to 3 or 3.5. And the total probably drops to 212 or lower. I really think it would move that much, but the spread wouldn't move that much. So if we get this Dame news and he's out, I think the under becomes a really, really strong bet. And then at the same time, if we get Dame playing and Nurkic not playing, the Blazers don't really have a backup center because Cody Zeller has been out for a while. They have Trendon Watford, who I don't think they're comfortable giving a lot of minutes to. We'll probably see Larry Nance and Robert Covington start at the 4 and the 5 if Nurkic doesn't play. So one, that hurts their defense a lot because Nurkic is their best rim protector and it's not especially close. And then it also likely speeds up the game because now you have a small ball lineup. And then plus Lillard's back. So like in that scenario, I think we could see the total up to like 224, if not higher. So like there is a massive range for where the over-under could fall for this game. So like the news here is going to be incredibly important in a way that I don't think is typical, because usually players don't move the totals all that much.
Okay. What do you think, Chirag?
Those points make a lot of sense, and I'm not going back on these past Blazers bets. They've hurt me too. But I just think that it makes too much sense to not sit there and wait for this piece of news. And I don't think that we're going to get it until like at least 30 minutes before the game. There's no way this hits beforehand. So you need to be prepared. That game is at 8:00. So sitting there about 2 hours from now, just have the sports book open, ready to make the decision. Whatever way it goes, play the other side. So you said, if Dame is in, expect it to be sped up. If Dame is out, you're expecting it to go down. So you'll get to grab the under right away. I would say just be ready with it. That's the biggest point in NBA betting, is that if you know you're waiting for news, just be ready for it, because you should be at least logged in or something like that. Like that's the biggest piece of advice that I can give for a scenario like this, because the line will have maybe a couple minutes, if at best, that you have your chance to get it in. And then after that, you're going to be left thinking like, okay, well, I moved to this and maybe there's something to come back the other direction. So I just think it makes most sense to just be ready on the attack for this one.
Our friend Julian Edlow has just posted the DraftKings Sportsbook splits for NBA tonight. And of course, we want to look, you make your, I think we talked about this quite a bit, but just.
This is Matt's favorite part of the show. He's so excited to talk about splits.
Sure does. Yeah, it's like that's his old world. Well, kind of. Making lines and then breaking down.
As usual, I would have a very complicated and long-winded take about splits. So maybe it's better that you don't ask me about it.
Oh, well, I was just going to relay them to people. 54% of the money is on the under 218 Blazers Pelicans. 46% of the money on the over. But then 60% of the slips are on the over 218. Just 40% of the slips are on the under 218. So I am going to ask you, any thought there, Meiselman, on those current numbers?
Honestly, no, because we don't know if certain players are playing. Like, I would value splits to some extent in cases where we know who's in. When you have so much uncertainty with who's going to be in the lineup or out of the lineup, like that's not going to affect my decision-making process, because we don't have the information. Like, we have what people have bet so far, but people are making bets on the over.
I guess so how about this though? What do you think is running through folks' minds based on those numbers, given that we don't know yet on Lillard or Nurkic?
I think that those bets probably all came in at different times. So Lillard was listed questionable last night, and Nurkic got downgraded to questionable today. With Lillard remaining questionable. So my assumption is that the under bets were made early and the over bets were made later, because I don't think it's a secret that if you take Nurk off the floor, Portland's defense is going to dramatically suffer. So I think that it might just be, the quirks of these particular bettors that were betting at those times, that the people that bet the under with Lillard getting downgraded bet one way, and then the people that bet the over with Nurkic getting downgraded bet the other way. I think because the news came in waves, that it makes it much harder than normal to like gauge what most people are thinking about this.
Also, to add on top of that, we don't have like an exact number of bets. So like we don't have like 100 or 150 or 200 bets going in A or B direction. So it's more you're taking these percentages at face value, and that face value could be, who knows, 10 bets, so 6 and 4 or something like that. You don't actually know what the quantity of that bet is, and we could have a different game on the board that's taking significantly more bets on the total, and that's like a 60-40 split too, but that one could weigh more. Like, so to look at splits, like I look at it from a perspective of like, okay, this is a chance maybe to fade the public. That's really the only time I'm looking at splits.
Well, hey, obviously it's a lot because people love DraftKings, man. So
Yes.
Well,
yes.
so
But there's also football
yeah.
on tonight. There's also college basketball.
That's true.
There's so much going on that you can't guarantee that there's going to have people with bankrolls like, I'm going to go spray an uncertain game. And if you're a sharp, you're waiting for that news.
So to Chirag's point, the merit to fading the public increases with the amount of total bets that are on a game, because then the public is influencing. If there's not many bets on a game, then we just assume the odds makers are setting the line closer to what they expect should be the fair line. But when there's tons and tons of volume, let's say on the Super Bowl, then there's more reason to care what the public is doing. So my hunch is that people are a little scared of this Portland game right now. And it's probably one of the lower bet games on this board. And more people are interested in, let's say, Suns Lakers, where it's really easy to have an opinion on the Lakers in either direction. I think that's probably driving a lot of people, where I imagine if you're a typical NBA bettor tonight, you probably have something on the Suns and Laker game, just because it's easy to make the case that, wow, Lakers getting 6.5 at home. That's crazy. That never used to happen. Or you make the case the Lakers are terrible. I'm just going to bet against them because they never win. I think there probably are a good amount of people on both sides of that argument.
Okay, so the other game you mentioned that you're looking at, Dallas and Minnesota. Dallas is a home dog, but this is pretty close to a pick 'em. It's just a 1 point spread. Dallas is getting the 1 point. It's at -115 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Doncic out. Hardaway out, Cleavers out, Bullock, Cauley Stein, Green, all out. We are waiting to hear on Kristaps Porzingis. How much of an impact does he have on your decision? Say he does get ruled out. What is he worth? 1 point? 2 points?
So this is a really important question, actually, because
thank you.
Just this needs to be discussed, especially in today's NBA.
It does.
Because just as an example, I'm going to use this player. It's going to seem like it has no relevance to what we're talking about, but Patty Mills was supposed to rest for the Nets a couple days back for a game against the Magic, and they ended up changing their minds because they were shorthanded. I think it was a couple guys were added to COVID protocols, but Mills was just supposed to be out for rest, so they decided to have him play. Patty Mills moved the point spread 4 points. Normally, Patty Mills probably doesn't move the point spread any points, but in the context of a team that has Cameron Thomas and David Duke Jr. and Kessler Edwards in the starting lineup.
Quick side note, Edwards and Duke were supposed to be playing the Maine Celtics last Thursday and Friday. And, they didn't. So I'm a little annoyed because I prepared to talk about both of them, and they decided to
I see.
So.
Yeah.
They were needed.
Let's give Glash a round of applause on air for
You don't have to do that.
For the Celtics gig. I just want to give you props because I just gave you a like on Twitter, but I just want to give you props on air too because you're a beast.
Yeah, it just came up naturally in conversation, so congratulations. So the point
shot.
there.
That was fair. That's fair. Keep going.
So the point there is that players who normally are not that impactful matter a lot more when other guys on the team are already missing, and that is highly relevant for Kristaps Porzingis on a team where Luka Doncic is out, Tim Hardaway Jr. is out, Maxi Kleber, who's his backup, generally speaking, is also out. So I think Porzingis, I think you're right that he's probably worth about 1 point or so. Normally, tonight, I think he's probably worth 5 points because this team is so shorthanded already. I do think the line currently is priced for him to be out, though. Minnesota is missing. There are only 2 real good defensive players in Patrick Beverley and Jared Vanderbilt. This is a team who does not have a lot left on defense, and they're not a great team to begin with, but Beverly low-key has been actually good offensively this year too. That's a big loss. Vanderbilt is one of their best rebounders in addition to being a good defender. I think this is a good spot for Dallas. I was leaning pretty heavily on the Mavericks, even as small favorites before we got that Tim Hardaway Jr. update. Now Dallas is thinned out to the point where they need Kristaps in there. If he plays, I actually think we see them move back to being maybe 2 point favorites again. Right now, you can get them at even money. I think it might be slightly more on the money line. So -105, but still, I think that becomes a strong value if Kristaps is in. But the main point here is just the players who normally wouldn't make much of a difference make a lot more of a difference if they're on a roster where you already have so many guys missing. So I'm much more closely monitoring the Kristaps news than I normally would be.
And to Chirag's point, you're going to have a very small window once you get that news to pounce on this. So
yeah, just one like important note there too is that players getting ruled in generally means you have more time than players getting ruled out. There's like everything kind of crashes when you get like big names out, but
right.
big name players.
Because to your point, it's already kind of baked in as if they
and it's
would
also
be out.
I think it might be a bias too. Like sometimes in is more relevant than out, but like for example, DFS projection sites will keep the questionable players in their projections until they're officially ruled out, even if they're listed questionable. I just think like the bias is to assume the player is going to play until we know he's not going to play. So I do think that buys you some extra time. Like the situation where Porzingis gets ruled in, I think you have a little longer than when he gets ruled out, just because like I think it's an industry-wide bias a little bit where out is more important than in, even though it's not necessarily the case, right? Like if we found out that Luka was going to return from injury tonight out of nowhere, like that's way more important than Kristaps not playing. But I think it's treated a little differently. So just wanted to make that point too, that like you actually do have a little more when a guy is ruled in as opposed to the other way.
So do you think Dallas +1 at the moment considers Kristaps in the lineup?
I think it considers him. I think it's trying to get at 50-50. Like I think a lot the betting line, which is different from the DFS projection sites. I think when it's a true questionable player, we'll try to put the line somewhere where it's in the middle, whether it's 60% one way, 60% the other way, whatever. It's close-ish to 50-50. But I think Dallas is just generally undervalued here. And I think that's been true for Dallas for about 2 weeks now, because like I think we've talked about on previous shows, Jalen Brunson is the league's best backup point guard. And I think he's more than capable of making up for other guys being out, specifically Luka. So to me, I think that like you have bigger names out for Dallas and supposedly smaller names out for Minnesota, like Beverly and Vanderbilt. I think Minnesota is worse off missing those two guys than Dallas is missing Luka. Like I think those two collectively make more difference to Minnesota than Luka Doncic does to Dallas. So I think Dallas is undervalued across the board. Like if Porzingis is ruled out, I think you wait till the line moves and you can bet Dallas later as like 3-point underdogs. And if he's in, you just take them here at +1.
All right, cool. Very good. We do have a question. We can, I guess, give some thoughts here on the classic contest as well. Our friend Robbie Noble from the YouTube chat asking the best look under 4K on the main slate.
I honestly was looking at this and Matt mentioned Patrick Beverly out. That's setting up for Jalen Noel to be the backup point guard, play 25 to 28 minutes, sitting here at 3,300, coming off two pretty decent games at that price. Even if he has, you can see there, he doesn't even play 20 minutes, doesn't even get up to 20 minutes because D'Angelo Russell's playing a full allotment of minutes. But like, that's a guy to consider. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to consider him just because of that salary at 3,300.
Anyone to add, Meiselman?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably the chalk value play as it stands. I think Trey Burke is the guy that becomes pretty interesting if he winds up starting. Although we did just right now, we're getting news Derrick Rose is out. So that is going to make Kemba Walker seem a lot more appealing. Rose was already a game time decision, so this isn't like totally out of nowhere. Kemba Walker's not under 4K. So for this question, I think it's still Burke. I'm just scanning quickly to see if the Knicks have anyone that fits that question for being cheaper.
I mean, not as a guard. No, they don't. Unless you're.
Do we have Kevin Knox back? Or I think if you click over to utility, maybe
Knox is out.
Yeah. So
Protocols.
I think you're getting more of the Knicks value from that mid-range where Fournier and Kemba and Alec Burks, like those guys are going to take on more of a role. Burks is up to 7,600 now, which is kind of a crazy price tag. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I think some Dallas guys could be somewhere to target. And then similar price range is a little more expensive, but and especially if we get this news after lock. But if Lillard doesn't play, Anthony Simons 4,500, like that becomes, I think, my favorite player on the slate because no one's really been talking about him today. I'm sure Lillard is projected in just across the board. There's no McCollum, and Simons was more expensive for a while when Lillard was out, but now his prices come back down to the point where like he's going to be the starting point guard. I think. I mean, maybe Dennis Smith Jr. starts, but Dennis Smith Jr. is 6K, which is, I mean, I don't think you can pay that even without Dame there. I mean, it'll be super contrarian, but Simons, I think, is like if you're looking for a value play that might become a massive upside guy. It's if Lillard's ruled out late, then I'm looking at Simons.
All right. Very good. Good stuff. Chirag, how do you feel about your Lakers tonight against the Suns?
Man, why you gotta come to me there? Like, I'm actually kind of like disappointed that like these Lakers to not make the playoffs bets are
let's actually check that.
I think it's off the board. I actually think it's off the board because I was trying to, come up with some ammunition before the show, and I don't think you can bet it anymore.
No,
I mean, we've been touting it for
Lakers to make there. You scrolled it.
I missed it.
What do we have?
No, plus 450.
Oh man. I mean, I still love that. I truly.
Honestly like
it was at 700. What, a month ago?
And it actually had bottomed out lower than this. I think it got down to only like plus 300 or so. Yeah. That was right before Anthony Davis got hurt again because they had won that road game in Dallas, which was like a huge deal for Dallas, potentially a bubble team for the playoffs if Memphis wins their division, which is looking kind of good right now too. But yeah, if like Davis hadn't gotten hurt, I think we could be a little more confident. But Davis got hurt. They lost to Minnesota, who they're competing for a playoff spot with. My calls the Lakers are going to be in the play-in round, whether they're the 7-8 or 9-10. Obviously, it makes a massive difference for their probability of getting through the play-in games. But if you're getting plus 450, even if you need them to lose twice in a row, I think that is still worth it. Like in my mind, there's very little chance that the Lakers are able to finish the season in the top 6 in the standings. And there's also very little chance they finish below the 10 seed. Like I think they'll be in the play-in in some capacity. But I think this is the best number you're going to get like the rest of the way because to me, it doesn't account for Davis being out.
I haven't asked this yet, and it's a silly question. We've been over this a million times. I just want, for clarity purposes, does the play-in game count as the postseason, the play-in tournament?
These bets will settle on after the play-in games are over.
Oh, so they could get in the play-in and lose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's part of why I like it that much. Yeah.
All right, just double checking. I mean, the play-in's still kind of new, and I wasn't sure if getting in the play-in.
That's actually a really, really good question because there have been books that have graded the play-ins as making the playoffs. There have been, so that's actually a really good question. But on DraftKings Sportsbook, it's all the way to the end when the official 8 are made.
Yeah, if you just needed them to get to the play-in, they'd probably be 20-1 favorites to make the playoffs. If the playoffs were graded as just being in the top 10. Because I think the Lakers are in trouble. I don't think they're going to fall by the 11th seed. There's 3 or 4 teams in the West that are like actively tanking. And then you just have like the Pelicans who aren't actively tanking yet, but like that may happen at some point. They're not going to drop below all of those teams. But I do think like Minnesota and Portland are still in decent spots actually to finish ahead of them just, as like the 6, 7, and 8 seeds.
Yep, I agree there.
Right, yeah, I think the depth there. Spurs, Thunder, Rockets, Pelicans.
Yeah, I'm not counting out the Spurs yet, but the other ones you said, I think the Spurs are the one team that could finish ahead of the Lakers out of that list.
Those are all the teams below the line right now. Those 5.
Yeah, the Spurs have faced a much harder schedule to this point than the Lakers have. Like I would expect from this point forward that the Spurs win more games than the Lakers do. But they're a few games back. So I don't think the Spurs finish with a better record than the Lakers at the end of the year. I think they win more just starting right now. I think the Spurs win more games.
Chirag needs IT time, fourth quarter. He needs a couple of games for IT.
It's amazing who is on this team. Like if the Lakers were playing in 2009, this would be the greatest team ever.
Yes.
It's so good.
But Kobe would still be here.
Yeah, right. It could be Kobe and all these guys. Imagine.
Yeah, you just swap in Kobe for Davis because I guess Davis was still in middle school or something then. But like there are some players who used to be incredibly good who are incredibly bad now. And it's like, I mean, the Isaiah Thomas signing is just it's more of the same, right? Like, why don't they go get someone who can just defend?
I was talking to my buddy from back home just about that when IT signed, and I was like, man, are we ever going to sign a defender? Like, is that in the plans whatsoever?
Is Marc Gasol still available? Is he, because like that was the best center of the
No, I think so Marc Gasol situation, I don't know if you knew this or not, but he was so angry that they got Andre Drummond in the buyout market that he forced his way into retirement, basically.
Wow. Because
he got Andre Drummond signing. He got a 2-year deal when he signed originally, and he was so upset with Drummond being picked up that he just bounced.
Yeah, the Drummond signing was bad even without considering that part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to move Westbrook or what?
Impossible.
They can't. Yeah,
We've been over this before, but there have been
They
rumors
would have
pointing to the reporting. Rumor mongering.
yeah. Who is there a player in the league, and it could be someone who's currently injured who just like has a similar contract who is similarly like not helpful for winning games? Like it would have to be a 1-for-1.
John Wall again. They got traded for each other back in the day.
Oh, yeah. I don't think Kemba's contract matches up well enough, like in terms of duration, right? Because Kemba has a shorter deal.
Yeah, he has 2 years, 19, and Westbrook is 40 million per.
Is it too early on Gordon Hayward?
Yes, because that team relies on his veteran leadership, and that team, like, they might not be tanking, but they're just good enough that they need just the way that MJ has built that lineup that they're not getting rid of.
And they just brought him in. I'm just trying to think off the fly. It's a great question, Meiselman. I think to answer your question, no, there is no one who compares to Russell Westbrook's contract.
I think John Wall is the closest.
Yes.
And he would probably hurt the
Lakers Russell Westbrook. Go back to Houston. That worked out really well.
It wouldn't be. It would be basically he would become a instant buyout. The trade would basically just trade for buyout scenario. That's all it would be. If that move was made, it was because John Wall didn't want to get bought out, and Russell Westbrook said, "Okay, I'll get bought out."
Yeah. So the Lakers, and I know we've said this 1,000 times. This is it. This is their team, right? They got to ride it out with this group and see what you do in the offseason.
I do have one sportsbook consideration for that game on player props, which is going to sound.
Let's get back on track. Here we are, like bashing Chirag, and we use every opportunity possible to bash the Lakers. Not you, Chirag, but your Laker fandom. You know, just
I got a cool hat on clearance because I live in Boston and everybody hates the Lakers, so I got a really cool hat. The Meiselman. I was like, all right.
I'm actually not going off topic here, though. This is going to continue with Lakers bashing to some extent.
Do it.
Very good.
Okay, so Wayne Ellington has started the last couple games. If you go to player props, I honestly don't think it matters whether you choose points and rebounds, points and assists, rebounds, assists, whatever. But if Ellington doesn't start tonight, he's likely not going to do that much. The Lakers actually have a ton of guard depth right now. None of it's good, but they have a lot of players. So I'm leaning towards if Ellington's not in the starting lineup, under 13.5, not over 13.5, or under 12.5 points and rebounds, like any of those, because I think there's a chance that with Talen Horton-Tucker back, that's the key piece of information there, that the Lakers might just keep Isaiah Thomas in the starting lineup and send Wayne Ellington back to the bench. I don't know this for sure. So like this bet is contingent on Ellington going to the bench. But if the Lakers start Westbrook, Thomas, THT, LeBron, and then let's say Dwight Howard, who likely I think is the starting center, then there's a chance Ellington just plays like 15 minutes tonight. And in that case, like this number is not even close. Like he's not going to have the ball enough to hit this many shots. And the Lakers have Trevor Ariza, who is a candidate to start. Carmelo Anthony is a candidate to start. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, these names. Like, and we're talking about Isaiah Thomas, Wayne Ellington, Trevor Ariza, and Carmelo Anthony right now. But 2021, these guys are all still relevant somehow.
I mean, and what's crazy is that, like, Ellington has played over basically 30 minutes in these last 3 starts.
Right.
You cut that. If he comes off the bench, he's at 17, 13, 19, 14, 15. Like those minutes are not going to get to this number. This number is projecting him starting. So that's a really good call.
Yeah, absolutely. The other bet I would have liked, it was here this morning and now it's gone, is unders on DeAndre Jordan. I actually think those probably all would have been voided anyway because I don't think he's going to play now that Dwight Howard's back. We'll see.
Yeah,
he's not listed.
The Lakers are going LeBron at center as the second like rotation around it.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out because DeAndre Ayton may just, have too easy of a time. I mean, if LeBron is the one guarding him, I'm sure LeBron can hold him down a little bit, but like, do they really want to have LeBron stick Ayton for like the whole fourth quarter? Because Dwight Howard doesn't usually play down the stretch. Like they're going to need, and there's no one else. Like my hunch is that they're going to need to play DeAndre a little bit, but I don't know. Maybe Dwight Howard just needs to play extra minutes. So like for DFS considerations, maybe that's something to look at with Dwight Howard, where like he's not that cheap. No one is playing him at, I think it's 46, right?
4,600.
Yeah. I'd be shocked if he doesn't start, and maybe because of the size of Ayton and then McGee off the bench, like you kind of need a big to play against the Suns. I don't know that LeBron can really do it at center against that lineup. Like the last game, the Lakers went super small. They were playing the Chicago Bulls. Vucevic is a perimeter player, basically. Like, he did get near the basket and it was a problem, but DeAndre Ayton is a little bit different. JaVale McGee plays his entire game around the rim. So maybe Dwight picks up a few.
Hey, man, JaVale McGee has hit a couple threes this year.
That's true. That is crazy. JaVale McGee would be the
against
best.
the Celtics.
They really should have kept him. I'm a big fan of JaVale McGee as a player. He's awesome.
Mark for the Celtics now. Going to be more positive. Sorry.
The Celtics are going to bounce back if we want to make that our final thing. I know they don't play tonight, but I think
bounce back. I'll stop.
That's it. I'm not a Celtics fan, so it doesn't.
I know you're not.
I know, but I think that the roster is really good. They haven't had the whole team healthy at any one point really the whole year. Someone's been out, and they don't have a ton of depth, but if the team can stay on the court together with all their core guys, I think they're really, really good. It's just their bench is not great. And if they're missing Horford or they're missing Robert Williams or they're missing both, Jaylen Brown was out for a while. Like they need everyone there. But if they have everyone there, they're a team that can go to the finals. Like they have a really good core on their team.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's in that development league. That's why they're doing so well.
Well, also, I apologize for giving you too much hope, but yeah, maybe they'll call up some of your guys.
JaVale McGee has not attempted a 3 in 3 straight games. Chirag, so maybe tonight's the night. It's his old team.
I think he just went a little wild with DeAndre Ayton out because those are the 3 games Ayton's been back for.
Yeah.
Ayton was out and he was like, whatever, let me just go for it.
Okay, I think we're going to call it a day.
What? We have one more piece of breaking news. Le'Veon Bell is signing with the Bucks.
Oh.
Excuse me?
I just had to break that. It literally just
Bell to the Bucks.
Okay, I mean, it's the injuries, man. It's the injuries.
All right, well, we're prepared now for a week of Ronald Jones touting for DFS at 5,100 because that's got to mean Fournette. Yeah, it's got to mean bad. I have to imagine he's out at least this week.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's Antonio Brown week, and I'm super excited.
Make that with what you will. Lev Bell to the Bucks. Okay. Hey, the both of you have a great holiday season. And is this it for both of you as far as the slate is concerned? I know we're not doing shows next week, but I think that's it for this group. I could be wrong.
Could be. I don't know. We'll figure it out in the new year. Let's just enjoy the moment. I'm just thankful we're all together, being able to crush this consistently. It's been a great show, and thanks for being our little leader host.
Hey,
and most importantly, stay on top of the news because that's always what we have to end with.
Yes.
Okay. He is C_Hira24 on Twitter. Preaching Sense. Matt Meiselman. Preaching Sense on Twitter. They do a great job covering everything you need to know in the DraftKings world. Sportsbook, DFS, NBA, NFL, and pretty soon, as Chirag said up the top of the show, Meiselman will be used in a lot of other ways.
He already is.
Hopefully,
whatever they ask.
He gets a raise.
I don't
thanks to Eamon.
Whatever they ask.
Thanks to Eamon as well as Tom behind the scenes. They are here, I think, some more this week. So you'll get Emerson, Reed, and Jeff tomorrow for NFL Thursday night, golf, other stuff. And that's going to do it. So all of you, be sure to keep up with the news. Garrett Gilbert's the quarterback, NBA stuff. Keep your eyes on the news there as well. Porzingis, Lillard, Nurkic. Those guys are important players. You all have a great night and see you in the new year on the slate. Good night.